Honorable members, order.
Switch on the microphone. Switch on the microphone. We're rising on a point of order.
On a point of order.
The microphones must be on.
Welcome to Politics Unmuted, where our microphones are never muted and we turn up the volume on all things political. I'm Qaanitah Hunter, the politics editor for News 24.
And I'm Lizeka Tandwa, the politics reporter.
My name is Pieter du Toit. I'm assistant editor for In-Depth News.
Coming up on today's episode, we'll be talking about some of the big political stories of the year. Guys, it's been a long year.
It has been a long year. It ended up with an anticlimax, if I may say so. It's been a very, very long year with COVID-19, with the politics that have been happening in the country and outside of the country. And you know, I wish that we could say that next year will be a little easier, but I think that we are set for a
But let's not talk
year.
about next year just yet. I mean, everyone is feeling the burnout, and it's really, all of us, in fact, probably you guys who are listening, are looking forward to the end of 2020. COVID-19 has taken this country in a whole new direction, has taken the world really in a whole new direction. And it doesn't bode well for our future, particularly we don't know what the world is going to look like. This will be our last podcast of the year. We'll be taking some time off, taking a breather before we hit the ground running again in the new year. And both of you are going on leave first, right? Next week.
Yes. Can't wait. And we'll get away from politics and news.
So what's the plan?
Not reading news at least, reading fiction, getting
You
away
can
from
block
everything,
us.
binging, staying away from Twitter, Facebook, and binge watching series.
Deactivate your
Absolutely.
notifications from the News 24 app.
And now the problem is, I'm halfway through the Obama book, which I'm really enjoying, but it's not light reading.
It's tedious.
And now when you're going away, I think, should I finish it or should I just go back to some other trashy novel or binge watch Breaking Bad again or something? Probably.
That's a good idea. I just finished The Crown. That was the best thing I've done for my sanity. Liz, what's your plans for December?
I haven't really had a concrete plan yet. Safe to say that I will be just relaxing in my couch, watching whatever guilty pleasure that I have. I usually watch Real Housewives. No one must judge me. It is my guilty pleasure. So I'm sure I'll be binging on anything that isn't serious or heavy.
Let's start this podcast with the most recent political developments, and that's Monday's judgment. Really a landmark judgment in which the public protector's report on the so-called rogue unit at SARS was set aside by the High Court in Pretoria. The court found that Public Protector Busisiwe Mkhwebane, in the court's own words, allowed her important office to be used to try and resuscitate a long-dead fake news propaganda fiction. That's what the court said. Peter, you've written a column on this, and really, is this finally the end of the road? Why was this judgment important?
It is the most comprehensive and sweeping legal judgment position on the status of this SA Revenue Services High-Risk Investigations Unit. The unit which became notorious after the Sunday Times published fake news by that newspaper's investigative unit, and that became part of our political lexicon. It was jumped on by numerous political foes of SARS, of the political heads of SARS, of the those in charge of the High Risk Investigations Unit. And between 2014 and 2020, we saw this fiction being maintained, and we're still seeing that fiction being maintained, especially by independent media who still continue to say that there is a unit at SARS that has gone rogue. But to get back to your original question, the importance of this is it swept off the table everything about the so-called rogue unit. It explained in chapter and verse what the unit is. So we've seen the unit being weighed up in front of a high court, not only a single judge, a full bench of the high court, 3 senior judges. So that's the first thing. The second thing is this is probably the worst court judgment delivered against Busisiwe Mkhwebane.
And we didn't think it could get any worse, right?
Exactly.
After the ABSA, what was
the
Reserve Bank judgment
against the president as well.
Yes.
So she's had some terrible judgments. Judgments in the past where the court has, for example, said it's clear that she doesn't understand the law. This time around, the court went even further. Like you just said, she was used for nefarious purposes. She allowed her office to be used. Now, the question is, who used it? Obviously, complaints laid by Floyd Shivambu, the EFF. We know what their political and ideological stance against, for example, Pravin Gordhan, SARS, National Treasury is. So that's the one thing. The second thing is that she lied to the High Court. She, for example, said she's in possession of a report by the Inspector General of Intelligence, or she initially said she did not have possession of the report. Then she admitted she does have possession of the report, and according to the law, you make yourself open to prosecution in that case. So she's in deep trouble. There's a parliamentary process ongoing at the moment looking to remove her. This will give it impetus. But the two most important things, the rogue unit narrative, surely it's gone now. And secondly, it's given impetus to Mkhwebane's enemies to get rid of her through the parliamentary process.
And Lizeka, it was classic Busisiwe Mkhwebane. When the judgment dropped, her response was Oksalayo. What does that mean?
I'm actually reading her statement that came out shortly after the judgment, and it's interesting that she says that she will obviously look into the judgment more extensively. But what interests me is that she says that she took note of the court's decision to strike out some of the vitriol that Minister Gordhan directed at her in his litigation. Obviously, Minister Gordhan, we know that he had questioned her competence and her legitimacy. So it's interesting that she focuses on the tidbits and not the scathing way in which the High Court, much like every other courts that her judgments have been appealed under, that she's always at the losing end, and the kind of judgments that befall to her really really questions whether she is competent to run that office. So it'll be very interesting to see what comes out of Parliament during the review on whether she's fit to hold office.
The court judgment, and if I can carry on where Liz left off, is sweeping. It's not a very close loss for Busisiwe Mkhwebane. The court was
not narrow in any way.
No, it wasn't. The court took off the table. The court criticized and took off the table all the reports and documents and reviews and panels on which she based her report, saying that they are all unreliable, untrustworthy, and unlawful. Sikakane, KPMG, the Inspector General's report, all of them she cannot rely on it. So it means that the report that she issued is unreliable and unlawful and was set aside.
And there was an interesting bit in the judgment, Pieter, where the court had said that she didn't even provide an alternative to the evidence that was put forward by, for example, one Johan van Lochenberg.
It's a very good point you make. She said Ivan Pillay, who was Deputy Commissioner of SARS for many years, responded in detail to the different communications from the public protector, the notices, the preliminary report, the notice of the preliminary report, and provided her office with documentary evidence and testimony under oath. The same with van Lochenberg, provided documentary evidence and testimony under oath.
And that was just disregarded.
And that was disregarded and swept off the table. But no one else came forward to put forward a different narrative, a different story. The EFF was specifically criticized in the court judgment, saying that they rejected van Lochenberg and Pillay's testimony.
But didn't give an alternative.
But didn't give anything else. The only version of events under oath in a high court was that by Pillay and van Lochenberg, supported by reams and reams of documents. And the court says it is inexplicable. The public protector, according to the Public Protector Act, needs to keep an open mind and needs to conduct an independent and logical investigation. According to the court, this did not happen. So again, if you look at the totality of all the court judgments against her over the last, 3 or 4 years, it's untenable, I think, for her to remain in that position. And remember, it's such an important position in constitutional democracy. You cannot have someone in that position if that person has been discredited to this degree.
And there was obviously a personal cost order against her, as was in numerous cases before. The Constitutional Court also weighed in on this, and the majority judgment actually ruled in favor of this. So there's no way that any other court is going to find differently on that punitive cost order against her. But just a few weeks ago, you remember when the CR17 case, her report was now challenged in the Constitutional Court. There was an interesting statement that was made by lawyers for the president, where was it Wim Trengove that said that she had this narrative and she basically needed everything to reach this already predetermined conclusion, and it didn't matter whether the facts backed up that predetermined conclusion. For her, this was money laundering, to the point that it didn't even matter whether the act that was cited, whether it was POCA or POCA or whatever it may be, whether that backed up the final determination. And that for me was a real indictment on her office. But what you see now is just her supporters rubbishing the judiciary now. And it's going to get worse, Liz, because she is now, there's obviously a panel, a 3-member panel, a former Constitutional Court justice, some top lawyers that have been put together by the Speaker of the National Assembly to deal with her impeachment. There's also a process in court at the moment, and then there's the process to disbar her. So there's all of these processes, but it's making, among her supporters, it's making her this victim of this broad conspiracy, as we've seen over and over and over. But do you think 2021 is going to be the year that there's some sanity that prevails in that very important office?
I don't think so. I don't think there's going to be sanity that prevails in that office. I mean, as you've said, you've listed the kind of the litigation that she has to go through, and I presume that it's going to take most of the year for that to happen. What we do know about the public protector is that she does thread in the political line. She has been known to be somewhat factional in how she runs her office. It's going to take a while. I don't see that office being her being removed or at the beginning or in the middle of the year. I think that it's going to be quite some time for us to see some sort of change in that office, which is very critical to our democracy.
Someone, though, needs to give her proper legal advice and say, look, this is the end. Because what we've seen, the pattern in the past is...
You think she needs to resign?
At the very least, not appeal this. Because what's going to happen is she's going to ask leave to appeal from the High Court. That's going to be denied, but that's a legal process.
It's going to go to the Court.
Then it's going to go first to the Supreme Court of Appeal. They're going to reject direct access. She's going to apply for direct access, then go to the Court. So there's immediately 3, 4, 5 legal processes surrounding this judgment that she could potentially exhaust, but that again will cost taxpayers money, millions of rand in legal fees and briefs, and she's gotten very bad legal advice. And
the thing is, you've gone through this road on APSA, you've gone through it now on CR17, you've been through it, so you learn your lesson and move along, lick your wounds and move along. But I mean, beyond this, obviously this week we cannot not speak about COVID-19. And that's because it has obviously filtered its way to the political landscape. There has been obviously unprecedented powers that were given to government under the state of disaster. Let's just go back to March and sort of appraise how government or how the political spectre played out in terms of the state of disaster and its impact on COVID-19. Pieter, what is your analysis?
If you cast your mind back to the 15th of March when the President delivered his first address to the country that Sunday evening, the world was in a state of flux. We didn't know exactly how this virus was spreading. We saw what was happening in China. We saw what was happening in South Korea. Italy was a total mess. We saw it was starting to spread very quickly in New York. And those are all first world countries with functioning health systems, departments of health. And my assessment now, obviously hindsight is a perfect science, but I do think initially, the president and government and the state reacted responsibly. With the information at government's disposal on the 15th of March, the advice and the argument from the epidemiologists and the virologists and the experts was, let's try to minimize the spread of the virus by limiting people's movement so that we can buy our struggling health system time. And I think our initial response was spot on. What happened after that, a month or 2 or 3 after that, the picture changed. And I think South Africans, rightly so, are frustrated by the way that government's handling this. And I think the PPE corruption was a major turning point in people's approach to the virus and the way that they gave government space and a wide berth to intrude in their personal lives. When
because
we
you squandered the goodwill that was given, because it was purely in good faith that you say, you know what you're doing, so do what you, and then you squandered it.
So we'll adapt our lifestyles because government has proven now for the last couple of weeks at least that they know what they're doing. But once money started being stolen again, then I think people were angry. They got angry, and I think, like you say, goodwill was wasted.
What was your impression of President Cyril Ramaphosa Lizeka during this entire crisis this year?
I completely agree with Pieter. I think he has tried to maintain some sort of stability and civility in the country. I had quite a number of questions about the president and how nonchalant, not really nonchalant, let me say how naive he was about COVID-19 corruption or the relief funds corruption, how it would spread, how quickly it would spread. And
I remember the warnings ahead of the money, people saying they're going to steal, and then he said, no, don't worry. And
exactly.
We wanted to believe it.
Exactly.
And as we're speaking now, the Auditor General is
3.4 billion.
Can you see that?
Yes, I can see that 3.4 billion. That has
I was wondering why you were looking at me.
So it's quite interesting. The Auditor General is holding a press briefing as we are recording this, and there's a slug that says an estimated 3.4 billion has been recovered. So I'm not sure if 3.4 billion is enough.
So how much was state capture? How much did we lose from state capture? $1 billion.
More than $1 billion, but it's in that range, isn't
right?
it?
And and COVID corruption literally was just a few months, and it's way more than that, right?
What COVID has done? It's exposed the failings in a creaking government, in a creaking state. We knew, I remember so well when the budget was delivered in February. We were in a hole then. We were in a fiscal hole where the big issue of the time was state-owned enterprises, and the public sector wage bill was dragging us down into a fiscal hole. Then COVID hit, and then it exposed the rot in so many government departments. It really exposed the extent to which state capture and poor governance has eroded service delivery over the years. I mean, our education. We can talk for hours about education. I mean, you and I are both parents. You've got children, and suddenly the whole schooling system came under pressure. The health system came under pressure. Policing came under pressure. Metro police came under pressure. So COVID exposed a lot of fault lines, I would argue.
Do you think the political space in terms of party politics is not what it was when we started the year?
That's an interesting question.
I think yes and no. Can I just
yes.
That's an interesting question.
So I think much is the same, right? But in terms of the bigger picture of how things work, but I feel like what COVID has done, or what 2020 has done, is that it really has changed the face of politics, party politics as we know it, in the sense that the ANC is at a point where it's accelerating its own demise. The DA is purposely, actively, lifting its hands off the wheel, and we can talk about why is that. The EFF is hell-bent, if to sustain the metaphor, into driving into traffic.
Do you think this was exacerbated by the current
I think it created an identity crisis for political parties. And so what happened is just there wasn't that unity of a Jacob Zuma or or a state capture or whatever it may be.
They didn't know how to respond to this, did they? I mean, how do you remain relevant?
Yes, that's it.
In a space like this, where if you think back to those first couple of weeks of lockdown when we were all cloistered in our homes, worked from home, but there was no movement. There was nothing happening. The only thing we were reporting on was infection rates, hospitalization rates, mortality rates. That was the big thing. And political parties struggled to remain relevant in that period. When you are the governing party, that it's a little bit easier because you're in government. You've got the state as your main marketing vehicle, as it were. But I think you're right in the sense that Parliament fell away. Parliamentary committee, the parliamentary process was in effect suspended for months. On local government level, the same thing. So I think you've got a very good point there.
I disagree with you to some extent when it comes to the DA. I think John Steenhuisen did a very good job of
in the beginning.
You think in the beginning?
I tend to agree with you. I'm agreeing with you, but finish your point.
I think he's done a very great job. Unlike Julius Malema, there was the strategy of the EFF of they had a book. I think they had
the book readings every week on
week,
Facebook. That was about it.
Which was about it, or the odd press statement. But I think in terms of John Steenhuisen, and obviously it was also coupled with him trying to remain relevant in order for him to gain the spot that he has now as the leader. But I really think that the DA did its job very well as the opposition.
I have to agree with you. If you the first couple of weeks, no, I agree with you, Liz. I think the first couple of weeks they played the role of a loyal opposition. They supported the president in the beginning. They said, look. Unlike now, but in the beginning they said the lockdown is the right way to go. We support the president. They met the president a couple of times, and I think they tried to offer advice. But July, August, when things started spiraling out of control and people started getting frustrated with government, I think people were getting tired of politicians in general.
Yeah. But at the same time, there is the what happened parallel to their response to COVID-19 is that the DA going through its own sort of turmoil. Yes, in the sense that it took its, I think, unnecessary position in relation to race relations. It was John Steenhuisen's election, whatever happened before, and then the aftermath from that. And I think that I may be wrong, but I think that the DA will take a long time to recover from 2020.
Well, if you look at those very recent by-election results, which the party have tried to spin, we've seen Helen Zille try to spin. If you drill down and look, the fact is that it was a poor electoral year for the DA. You can't get away from the raw numbers. They might argue otherwise, but they lost certain wards which they held for quite a number of years. So they were shocked in that sense too. We are moving towards a municipal election next year. That's going to be the big test for the DA to see whether they have recovered a semblance of support. If you look at what happened in Northwest Swaziland, they did not recoup the support that they lost a couple of years ago. So the more the softer stance they took to voters that they wanted to get back. I don't know if that's working.
I also think that we have to be mindful of where the DA wants to go, because even though we talk about what the DA needs to recover, but what exactly does it want to recover?
Maybe it doesn't want to recover.
Yeah, maybe it doesn't want to recover, or if it does want to recover, for instance, you just spoke about Northwest and those votes, those critical votes to them. And also we have to look at the EFF as well. I mean, the EFF, where is it heading?
But let me pause you for a second there, Liz. Do you think that the irrelevance that the EFF had in the initial part of the lockdown and of COVID-19 is what propelled them to just be so guns blazing in terms of just finding a cause in relation to race relations and what we saw around Senegal and the Clicks hair protest? Do you think that it was just like, we need to be seen and we're going to do it at all costs? I don't know if that's simplistic. But
Yeah,
I'm putting it out there.
I think it is simplistic, but I do think that it's quintessential EFF politics to jump into Black Lives Matter, to jump into Senegal and cliques. I would have found it very odd if Julius wouldn't have made a big hoorah about cliques and Senegal and Brackenfell. But I do think he did realize that he needed to leverage something out of this year. He had a very slow year, and that is unlike the EFF, for the EFF not to have some sort of relevance. Obviously, there wasn't Parliament where the Parliament becomes their theatre. So I do think it's not as simple as that, but I think the EFF managed to, I don't know, managed, they kicked off this, their start was very slow, but somehow they managed to pull themselves back.
And then one other thing that we have to talk about is the economy. I don't know if there's any more ideas left.
Qaanitah, yes, the economy has been, it should actually, alongside COVID, be our biggest story. And you guys reported thoroughly and very, 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 very in-depth, in an in-depth way about the NEC meeting over the last couple of days. And it was all about leadership and Aismagashule. But, you know, the issue front and center in all South Africans' lives is how to eke out a living, how to maintain a livelihood, and how to not get sick.
Yeah, that's actually 2021. How do we eat? Where do we get a living, and let's not get sick? That's basically what the ordinary person is dealing with.
And when Tito Mboweni delivered his budget speech in February, the big issue was Eskom, you know, maintaining and keeping the lights on. How are they going to break up Eskom into 3 different entities? The future of SAA, you know, should SAA fly or not? The public sector wage bill, because we're in a fiscal hole. Moody's shortly after that, and Fitch downgraded us even further. You know, all 3 ratings agencies are now, we're in junk territory under all 3 ratings agencies.
So Ramaphosa said that we entered COVID-19 already on a losing wicket.
Yes. And in this period of COVID-19, we saw SAA being recapitalized to the tune of 10.5 billion rand. But when the emergency COVID budget was passed, you know, they took money away from the Department of Health. You know, we reported this week about South Africa missing the deadline to pay 500 million rand to get into the COVAX scheme to make sure that we get vaccines. They missed the deadline, but we recapitalized SAA. You know, so it tells you something about priorities, and it tells you something about Pieter Mboweni's political standing.
Ramaphosa is going to have to pull a rabbit out of the hat when he addresses the State of the Nation in February. It certainly has been an interesting year for the country, and a politically tumultuous one at that. As always, there's so much to debate and digest when it comes to politics in this country. But that's all we have time for you today. From all of us at Politics Unmuted, we wish you a restful Christmas break. Thank you for listening. This episode was produced by my colleague Catherine Rice. The music was courtesy of Getty Images and Epidemic Sound.